Okay, let's jump right into this explainer, because it's going to completely reframe what we think we know about the global energy transition. We're looking at a story that is so frequently misunderstood as just this strictly environmental initiative, but in reality, it's actually one of the most aggressive economic and national security pivots in modern history.
So get a load of this mind-blowing fact to start us off. China had this massive, super ambitious target to hit up specific wind and solar capacity by the year 2030. Well, they actually achieved that target in 2024. That is a full 6 years ahead of schedule. Just think about what 6 years early actually means in terms of physical, on-the-ground infrastructure. We are talking about millions of solar panels and wind turbines installed at absolute warp speed. That kind of acceleration doesn't just happen. It requires a totally unprecedented mobilization of capital, policy, and industrial might.
And to really illustrate the scale we're talking about here, in 2025, China's clean energy sector contributed $2.1 trillion to their economy. Just to put that into perspective, if that clean energy sector were its own standalone country, it would be the 8th largest economy in the entire world. It literally matches the entire economic output of nations like Brazil or Canada. So yeah, this is no longer just some niche environmental sector. It is a macroeconomic heavyweight.
But actually, it's wilder than that, because their broader economy has basically become entirely dependent on this single sector. Clean energy drove over 35% of China's total GDP growth in 2025. In fact, if you stripped away these clean energy sectors, solar, electric vehicles, batteries, they would have completely missed their national economic growth target of 5%, coming in at just 3.5%. This sector is fundamentally propping up their entire broader economic expansion.
Section 1. Escaping the oil tanker, the hidden motive. So, the crucial point here is answering the big question. Why exactly are they mobilizing at such breakneck speed?
Well, it's not primarily about reducing emissions, right? It's about energy sovereignty. China is the world's largest oil importer. They rely on foreign sources for over 70% of their oil needs. That means their entire economy is perpetually at the mercy of foreign oil tankers navigating really vulnerable geopolitical choke points. To become a true, unassailable industrial superpower, they absolutely have to break that dependency. For anyone watching global politics, this is the puzzle piece that explains everything they've been doing lately.
And you can literally see this anxiety baked right into their official policy timeline. Look at the 15th five-year plan, which covers 2026 to 2030. This blueprint officially maps out the pivot from fossil fuel dependence toward establishing China as a self-sufficient energy powerhouse. They are shifting the whole definition of energy security away from just securing foreign supply lines and toward total 100% domestic technological sovereignty.
Section 2, the grid integration pivot, because that level of ambition requires a massive infrastructural shift.
You see, generating cheap solar and wind power isn't enough anymore. You actually have to build a system that can absorb and distribute all that intermittent power. So they are pivoting hard from just generating raw capacity to serious system integration. We are looking at targets of 300 gigawatts of grid energy storage, pushing 45 ultra-high voltage transmission lines to move power from the windy and sunny west over to the coastal megacities in the east, and all of this is fueled by a staggering $92 billion in annual grid investments.
And here is how that strategy actually functions in the real world. Step 1. Generate massive amounts of solar power during the daytime. Step 2. Instead of wasting the excess, you store it in that sprawling 300 gigawatt battery network. Step 3. Deploy that stored energy to supply 20% of the evening peak demand. This step-by-step grid integration is designed specifically so that renewable energy can genuinely displace coal and gas on a massive scale, rather than just acting as a supplement.
And the data shows it's totally working. As of February 2026, their clean electricity capacity officially crossed the 52% threshold, meaning for the very first time in history, clean capacity exceeded fossil fuel capacity on their grid. It's a historic, absolute tipping point for the country.
Section 3. Heavy trucks and batteries. Let's zoom in on a hyper-specific tactic they're using to pull this off.
Now you might be wondering, with all the hype around sleek electric passenger cars, why are huge, clunky, heavy commercial trucks suddenly at the very center of this grand national security strategy?
The math comes down to this. Despite years of high sales, passenger car fleet penetration is still only hovering around 12 to 15%, mostly because cars last a long time and rely heavily on shifting consumer preferences. But heavy trucks, they burn massive amounts of imported diesel. We're talking nearly half of China's transport oil demand, and fleet operators replace them roughly every 7 years. Importantly, those purchasing decisions are driven purely by the total cost of ownership, so they are the absolute perfect fast turnover target for rapid electrification.
And to make that total cost of ownership completely irresistible, operators are leveraging specialized time-of-use electricity prices. Basically, by charging up when grid prices are at their absolute lowest, operating an electric heavy truck becomes radically cheaper than running a diesel equivalent. Fleet operators are ditching diesel purely for the massive economic savings, which perfectly aligns private business interests right alongside national security goals.
Of course, the biggest hurdle for electric trucking is range anxiety and downtime, right? Well, their solution is National Standard 2026-2331T339. Catchy name, I know. But what it does is forcefully standardize battery swapping technology nationwide. It ensures complete compatibility between heavy vehicles, swap stations, and the batteries themselves. Instead of sitting idle on a charger for hours, a massive semi-truck can pull into what is essentially an electric pit stop, swap its depleted battery for a fully charged one in mere minutes, and get right back on the highway.
Section 4. Exporting the storage ecosystem. What does this massive domestic laboratory mean for the rest of the world? Well, because of relentless domestic demand, China has achieved totally unparalleled economies of scale. By 2025, they controlled over 90% of all global energy storage battery shipments. The rest of the world combined is basically just a tiny sliver of a rounding error in the overall market.
And that absolute market dominance has had a staggering deflationary effect globally. Because they are producing at such a massive scale, storage system costs have plummeted by an astonishing 70% in just the last 3 years alone. This isn't just slightly cheaper, it fundamentally rewrites the economics of energy worldwide. And this triggers the next phase of their industrial strategy. They aren't just shipping wooden crates of individual batteries anymore. No, they are delivering entire plug-and-play energy ecosystems. The battery cells, the integration software, the engineering expertise, the whole shebang. They are exporting this fully baked solution to places like Pakistan, which is dealing with a severe energy crisis, and directly into Europe. They are essentially selling the very blueprint of their grid transition to the entire world.
Section 5. The end of global oil? Yeah, this brings us to a rather massive geopolitical elephant in the room. I'll leave you with this provocative thought to chew on. As this domestic electrification strategy fully isolates China from global oil shocks, and as they systematically eliminate their reliance on foreign diesel through battery-swapping heavy trucks and massive grid integration, what exactly happens to the global oil market when its absolute best customer simply stops buying? It is a fundamental shift that will completely redefine global geopolitics and energy flows over the coming decade. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.